I was going to be out at 10:30. Next thing you know, it was like 11:30. This Week in E-Commerce, episode 136. I am Mal Chia, back with you after missing a week. We did say that we never miss a week, and we missed a week. Alex, what happened?
I know. It's probably one of our first weeks we've ever missed. For a good reason, though. We were very, very busy at Retail Fest, but a bit of a shame to ruin our streak.
Yeah, I know. It's like, it was like even last year we managed to record. I can't remember how we did, but we still did. But this year it's like we were trying to do a live recording, couldn't organize the equipment. And then next thing you know, you were busy, I was busy. But anyway, how was your Retail Fest?
It was awesome. I think it was my favorite one yet. I say that every year though. It's a great event, so much community. I felt like we're all tackling pretty big problems and facing a lot of issues, but that camaraderie and that positivity that we're all in this together, for me, really shone through.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I would not say that last year was one of my favorites. So I'm not going to say that like every year is. But this year really felt like that sense of community really shone through. There were so many really great events, the Pink Flamingo event, which I only remember most of, I think. There was the WhatsApp party, but then also just those random chats you have with people. I hardly got into any sessions because I couldn't walk more than 10 meters without someone stopping me and wanting to chat. And it actually got to a point at one stage where I was like, I'm going to go like the inside way because I can see a whole bunch of people outside who will stop me and I just need to go. And that worked out really well. But it was a fantastic few days.
It was hard to move more than 1 or 2 meters before bumping into someone else and getting stuck in a chat. But that's what I think the value is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, well done to Dylan, Courtney, and the rest of the Retail Global team. Dylan, I can't believe this is your first one with you in charge. It just went so smoothly. It was awesome. But also to like Dean and Jethro as well with their WhatsApp parties. So really, again, helping to bring the community together.
Yeah, and look, that one was Pink Flamingo, obviously amazing way to kick off the event, but the birthday party, really beautiful way to get everybody involved, and it was absolutely packed. They did a very good job.
Again, like that, I said I was going to be out at 10:30. I remember I was talking to Anthony from MailChimp. Next thing you know, it was like 11:30. Then I stopped talking to someone else. I think I was talking to Raj from Global E. Then it was like midnight. Then I'm on the dance floor. Then it's like 1 a.m. and I'm like, I got to go. It was a really great couple of days. What was your take on some of the negativity coming out of it from Simon Beard, founder of Culture Kings, who really had a go at the event?
Yeah, I think, look, I don't follow him. So it was one of those things that I heard from other people and then I had to go in and find out what was going on myself. Maybe you can speak to the content, but my takeaway was it was awesome to see everyone rally kind of against it, and that being that last day of the conference and then everyone throwing positivity to the Retail Global team. And it was that, again, that camaraderie at the end of it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the content, I guess the post which Simon reshared of someone DMing him was someone who said that he was at Retail Fest and he couldn't believe how poor the content was, that it's all beginners and it's all run by vendors, which then led to Simon's own take on it, where he said that, when it's run by vendors, you've got sponsors, they're going to bring in their own agendas, and a view like that. Look, I think it was kind of unnecessary because I thought the content was actually pretty good. There was a really good diversity of content. You could argue there was too much AI content. And I think Simon, with what he does with his business now, is very much focused on being at that bleeding edge of AI. Whereas this is more of an understanding about where the reality actually is for most brands. Most brands aren't like implementing OpenClaw into every single thing which they do. They're much earlier in their AI journey. But then there were also people like Ellen from the Subway Co, who's a much, more sophisticated operator. And I had a panel with her. So you need to have that diversity. And I don't think it was particularly like driven by sponsors either. Sure, there were sponsors, but what event doesn't have sponsors? And like Simon, the One Life Club, him and his billionaire mates, millionaire mates, sure, they can put on an event and not have sponsors. But the reality is that for Retail Fest, e-tail, online retailer, iMedia, these things don't exist without the ecosystem, of vendors and sponsors who can financially support it to bring together the rest of the retail community to learn and grow together. Anyway, that's kind of my 2 cents there. It was just kind of disappointing to me that someone who I always looked up to in the retail scene really needed to have a crack at Retail Fest and then plug One Life Club as well. It just didn't sit right with me.
Yeah, it was the plug at the end that just kind of took the gas out of it, right? But with just the vendor and sponsorship angle too, these businesses exist to help retailers. It's I don't know, it's just part of that community.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything which is a sales pitch. And God, like, if it is a sales pitch, people know that. People can tell it's a sales pitch and will walk out. Like, sure, like, there might have been a couple of plugs of mateship on the panel there, but I don't think it was overboard. It all kind of fit naturally into what it was all about. Yeah, and yes, everyone has a point of view which you're trying to get across, but just as long as you're doing it in a non-salesy way, there's nothing wrong with that. But anyway, we are digressing way too much and we have limited time unless we end up with like a 45-minute episode. So we're going to dive straight into it. Not really straight into it. Super Retail Group, their shares have dipped by 13% off the back of their H2 to date results. So BCF, Bodie Camping Fishing, down 3.3%. They also own Super Cheap Auto, Rebel, and MacPack as well. And they're currently looking and saying that, there's this kind of perfect storm of which they're fighting against, which is going to affect the discretionary spend. And off the back of that, their share price has dipped quite a lot. Not quite Allbirds levels, but still 13% is a fairly big hit.
Yeah, I think look, I'd agree with the perfect storm when it comes to everything that was going on with fuel prices, that being right before we had Easter long weekend, which is typically the number one kind of camping event for the year. And when you think about their portfolio, that affects BCF and also Super Cheap Auto. They're both kind of that automotive outdoor camping.
Yep.
And
MacPack as well.
backpack, exactly. So, yeah, it's I don't know what else they can do from that. We've had that confidence and now fuel prices are in a better place. It was just a rough kind of 2 weeks in terrible timing.
And a part of it is like, how do you position yourself as being an essential? The reality is most retailers are discretionary spend, but the ones who are doing well actually have their products positioned quite well as being like painkillers. So people can't live without it. So I think there's still a way where you can think about positioning your product, positioning your category so that people can't live without it. They're not going to delay the spend. It's something which they need now, but I don't think it necessarily applies to everyone. But it's kind of that thinking which you kind of need. Like thinking about, well, you need it because you need a break. You need to get away from life. So what better way than to go camping and come to BCF?
100% unplug the family and have some quality time.
Yep. All right. Our second story, second quickie, is also about the ASX and Universal Store released their FY26 trading update, and their shares also fell 3.1%. So Universal Store own not just Universal Store, but Perfect Stranger, Thrills. So all in that discretionary spend, that youth and young adult fashion. And what's happened is that while they're saying that their expectations are going to be good, it's not enough for the market. Yeah, and showing that in particular with this younger market, who hopefully the budget is trying to address, they're doing it tough. They're the ones with whose wallet has been impacted the most by a lot of these increases. And I think the market's also looking at that and saying, well, you need to perform better than that because your market is shrinking.
Yeah. And historically, their target market are the ones with that ultimate discretionary spend, right? So to see the youth being responsible with their dollars, I think, yeah, it's definitely a sign of the wider market there too.
Yeah. And our final quickie is Meta have launched their Hatch agentic AI and Instagram checkout. So Mark Zuckerberg, who I'm actually going to be meeting, well, maybe not meeting, but I'm going to be seeing in a couple of days' time. I'm here in San Jose, has announced that they've now released their consumer-facing agentic AI assistant, which is going to be their answer to OpenAI and Claude products. So everyone's getting into the space. Where do we go?
Everybody's getting into the space. It reminds me, obviously a bit different, but when Instagram first opened Instagram Shop, and that was going to be able to shop within the app. And then it turned out you're just redirecting people to the websites anyway. I think there's a long way to go in this space. I don't see people freely giving up their credit card information and saying, buy what you will for me as part of Hatch. You're probably the best dressed to talk about this next week after you've heard from Mark to hear his takes. That's super exciting.
Yeah, I'm not sure where this is going to go because, like, to be honest, this caught me by surprise because I missed the original announcement back in February about where this is going. But Meta have been obviously pushing to becoming more of an AI company and embedding AI in everything which they do. Same as how Gemini has very quickly become, the world's number one most used AI. It's whether because they own so much of the attention already that by default people are just going to go, well, I don't need a Chat GPT subscription, I don't need a Claude subscription, I'm just going to use this instead. So I think that for the majority of users, it's probably going to become the default for them. So I think it's actually going to be quite powerful once the adoption is there for them, because I'm imagining it's going to be built directly into the platform as
Mm.
well, rather than being a standalone app. And if that's the case, then people never need to leave Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp or whatever their choice is. They can ask that question directly there and have products served to them right in that experience.
I agree with that. I'm just not convinced on that next level of complete shopping autonomy within those agents, right? I use the TikTok agent a fair bit. And to your point, it just keeps you in the app rather than you going across to different platforms. So, yeah, it definitely makes sense. They need to be into that game.
Don't forget in seven, when Jeff Bezos started Amazon, people thought, why would I ever buy something online? I'm not going to put my credit card into a
Yeah.
website.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I think it's definitely coming. I'm just in the pace we'll see in the adoption rate.
All right, we're going to get into our deep dives now. And our first one is a huge story because only a couple of weeks ago, we talked about how ClickFrenzy and Power Retail were going into administration. But now they've been bought out of administration by no less than Gabby and Hezi Leibovich, founders of Catch of the Day, who have decided that they're going to purchase this company. So now ClickFrenzy has been bought out of liquidation, and it's being relaunched. I'm not exactly sure what it's going to be relaunched as, but given Gabby and Hetzy's history with Catch, Little Birdie, and a few other platforms as well, I dare it's probably going to stay very focused on those deals of them. What do you think about this one?
What you've just said, like they've got great experience in marketplace and deals. If anybody is in that position to kind of to take it to the next level, it's them, right? I think that where we're at now in retail, people are trying to move away from discount culture, and we've been saying this for years, but it's becoming a need rather than a want at this point. So I'm not sure how relevant continuing to have these different discount cycles will be.
I agree that I think, if they revive it just as it is with like doing Click Frenzy, Travel Frenzy, and any other sort of frenzy, it's just more of the same. And that business model has proven that is no longer relevant now. And even if you look at Catch as well, Catch was sold to Westfarmers for $230 million like 7 years ago. Westfarmers shut it down. So that whole discount type approach, it doesn't really resonate with the customer anymore, particularly when they've been trained around Prime Day, Black Friday, Afterpay Day. They don't need one site to aggregate a whole bunch of deals to go, and they'll go to where they're interested in going to see whether you're running that deal. So I'll be very curious to see what they do with this, but also Power Retail, whether they revive Power Retail back as a media platform, because that also requires a different way of thinking as well. Running a media outlet is fundamentally different to running a deals platform. So if they're going to do this, what happens to Power Retail, if anything at all?
100%. And just to your point there around kind of having a solution to aggregate deals, that's where AI is moving, right? So being able to crawl all of that information and aggregate for you. So yeah, the value proposition is not as tight. What's the piece where Retail Global purchased part of the business as well? So it's actually been split off.
I did see that. I can't actually remember what Dylan said about that, but yes.
I think it's got
So
to
have
do
they
with
bought
the
have they bought the media and events? Yes. So whether the media and events side, yeah, that would make sense.
yep. So
I
I
think I was a
think the
little
power
hungover when Dylan sent posted that update.
it was early in the morning. No, so my understanding is Retail Global have got that events piece, the Power Retail. Then it's the Click Frenzy that I see moving over to Gabby.
Got it. And to say that makes sense from the Retail Global side of things. They've already got Retail Fest. It makes sense for them to add another event onto their portfolio, especially an event as highly regarded as All Star Bash. But in terms of the Click Frenzy piece, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't really pass the smell test for me, given that the business wasn't able to be successful previously. It blamed a lot of conditions like the Iran war, as reasons why it wasn't able to perform, which did make a whole lot of sense. personally don't understand why you would try to revive it in this shape. Like I said, I hope I'm wrong. And look, it'd be a hard person to bet against the brothers, but in
Yes.
this
Yeah.
case, I think I probably would. I'm taking the under on this one.
I've got faith in them. I reckon they'll dig in and we'll see it have a new life. But what that life looks like, we'll find out.
Yeah. Okay. We talked before about the perfect storm, and we're getting more and more headlines about that now. CommBank are forecasting that headline inflation is going to hit 5.4% by mid this year. And all the big retailers, Harvey Norman, JB's, Bunnings, Kmart, Big W, they're all preparing for poorer trading conditions as well, and are looking to offload a whole lot of inventory. And this is also interesting because yesterday we had the budget announcement, which seems to be more geared towards first home buyers, changing some of those structural issues with the budget and our trade. But I don't think that's going to have an immediate impact. Like if you think about a first home buyer, like this is going to help them immediately, but this will help them in a few years' time, as negative gearing gets phased out and as those previous property investors aren't going to be in the market. Yes, it'll allow those first home buyers to get into the market, but even at the inflated prices things are at now, it's still not going to lead to any immediate positivity in terms of consumer spending and consumer confidence.
Yeah, I think even a few years is probably too short term. I think this is kind of like a decades long change that will start to filter through. So definitely not a quick win. Players like JB that have such low operating costs that have always kind of been prepared for moments like these, I think are well placed. But then you can't forget their massive store network and just that brick and mortar piece, which is a double edged sword for them sometimes in these instances.
Mm. And also, when you think about your costs are going up as well. Like Australia Post introduced their new costs last week. I think their costs went up about 19%. So this is a pretty significant whack for a lot of retailers who are already struggling with like the higher cost of importing goods, lower consumer demand, buying more on ads. So all of this, it's not paying. It's not shaping up to be a very rosy picture, unfortunately.
No, it's not. But what's that saying? Anything that's easy isn't worth having. We just got to work harder with less. And that's been the story for a long time now, right? People need to do more with less. So it's getting creative and ultimately using AI.
Yeah, well, I think so too. And it was one of those conversations which I actually had quite a few times at Retail Fest with a lot of brands who were talking about like it is much more challenging now. And they were looking to actually get off that ad drug. They realized that easy money isn't there anymore. And they actually need to be smarter in terms of how they operate. They can't just think, I've got a product, I'm just going to pump a shitload of ads behind it and I'm going to be a millionaire. It's actually a lot more than that. Do I have the right product? Do I have product market fit? Do I have the right brand to support that? Then do I have the whole fulfillment? Do I have the on-site experience? That it's a whole cycle which you need to look through, not just product, ad, sell.
Yeah. I think it's sustainable, profitable growth.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, and our final one, Harvey Norman. This is a bit of an anonymous story, so it's still yet to be proven. But there was an anonymous report from a whistleblower about how Harvey Norman works with their vendors in terms of just like some of the kickbacks which they're providing. There's a lot to be sorry. I don't know. I'm still in US time, still a bit jet lagged, so I apologize for my brain not fully working. But there was a letter from an anonymous industry buyer who alleged that senior category buyers at Harvey Norman were being paid with cash, essentially cash bribes, supplier-funded overseas trips, vendor-funded entertainment to stock their products. This doesn't. I'm not sure what to make of this. Whether at what point, because they are a commercial organization, is that going into bribery versus just customer relationships? I'm not going to speak to the to the tech brand, but there was one tech brand a few years ago who was trying to crack into e-commerce and literally flew about 100 people to Bali for an all expenses paid trip for like 3 or 4 days. So there's quite a bit of this which goes on, but I wondered, like, at what point does it look suspicious? And is it really
Yeah.
suspicious at all? Or is it just like, is it fair? Because if you've got the budget for it, then go do it.
Well, look, I've got a couple of thoughts on this. I think it makes it difficult for new players to enter the market, right? Who can't afford to take these buyers out on fancy dinners and give them iPhones or whatever the kind of kickbacks are. So It definitely hurts the barrier to entry. I think that working with brands, they need to have clear guidelines on what is acceptable and what isn't, right? I've invited people to dinners before and they've said, no, it's not within our policy because we're in a buying cycle at the moment. So at least there's that black and white line drawn in the sand, if you will. So I think if anything, it's an exercise for Harvey Norman to define what is appropriate and what's not, and then look at that behavior from there.
Look, and we have to stress that these are unproven allegations. This is an
Right.
anonymous letter, so I don't know how much of it actually is true or isn't true. No one knows at this point in time. But it does raise the question around, like, what's actually possible in this and what can you get away with. I remember when I was working for multinational companies, US companies, we had to abide by the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which essentially meant that you couldn't take anything. Right. Although you still did. If there was a foreign owned entity, you just couldn't take anything from them. So this is a really interesting one about where you kind of draw the line for that. But then also in terms of like making sure that when you with your buyers, you know exactly what they're doing as well, and they are actually acting in your best interest. So I think it's even with like looking at referral fees. Some people don't mind referral fees. Some people are very much against taking the referral fees. Would rather pass on the discount. I think a lot of it just comes down to transparency. As well. If you are going to accept anything like this, you actually declare that to whoever is actually you're accountable to, whoever's accountable to the budget, so that if worse comes to worse, at least you can show that you were transparent in your decision making, as well, and that this didn't impact that.
And ultimately acting in the interest of the business regardless.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So very interesting one, but yeah, just raise that question about how much do you give away? How much is too much? I guess.
Mm.
All right. And on that note, we are going to wrap it up here because I do need to jump onto another call and get over my jet lag. Alex, any more travel and the conferences coming up for you?
We've got the Evocative Media Summit in Melbourne in a 3-ish weeks. So I'm going to get over to Melbourne for a week or so, spend some time. It's been a while, but in between them, I'm looking forward to just getting into a routine and not getting on an airplane for a while, which I don't think you can speak to at the moment, Mal. You're everywhere.
No, I'm in the US and I'm coming back to the US. I've got Sydney, then I'm going out to Singapore, speaking at another conference over there, and then online retailer. Is that end of June?
End of July.
Is that
I
July?
think it's
End
July
of July.
27th.
Okay, so I've got a bit of a break before then.
Yeah.
So quite a bit still coming up for the year. Okay, that's all we have this week. Thanks for listening. Keep innovating, keep growing, and keep selling. And we will be back with you next week.
We will see you next week.